that you don't care, no. You just don't care, no. I don't wanna play, baby, I'm just fine. I don't need you anymore.
For content information and the link to the written version of this video, please check the description below. If you would like to support me, please consider checking out my links in the description below, where you'll find my Cash App, my GoFundMe, my email for inquiries, and also my Twitter handle @UTU with JJ. This is a brief entry discussing what trigger warnings are, why they need to be used, and most importantly, how to use them in a way that benefits all. So without further ado, let's get into it. What is a trigger warning? It's important to understand what a trigger warning is before including them. If you don't know what it is, you're not going to be able to utilize them correctly. A trigger warning is simply a warning to the consumer of the content you're creating, be that a blog, novel, video, tweet, etc., about what your content includes. This doesn't mean you need to write an entire glossary of terms mentioned in your content. Not only will that take forever, but it also defeats the point of having trigger warnings there in the first place, because you are not highlighting the specific triggers that need to be highlighted. So how do we know what is and what isn't a trigger? The fact is, there is no way of being able to tell what will and what won't be a trigger for an individual. But there are triggers that are more obvious and common, such as violence, alcoholism, sex, or abuse. There are plenty of lists online explaining such triggers you should be highlighting. The one I use personally is this list created by Lauren Hanna, which you will find linked in the description below. It gives a detailed list of common triggers as well as specific versions of these triggers as triggers to highlight. This list was specifically created for books, but of course this isn't the only place these triggers can be found, so it's useful for other content as well. If you're unsure what a trigger is, it's essentially something that causes an individual harm. For instance, if an individual was assaulted in the past, that could cause them to feel distressed when they are met with the topic of assault. Some of my personal triggers include rape and grooming, for reasons I won't get into, but are somewhat clear. And clarity is what's most important, which brings us to how to use trigger warnings. As you may have noticed at the beginning of this entry, I mentioned that you'll be able to find my content information in the link in the description below. This is so you are aware that there are triggers within this video that you can find as soon as you begin. All I did was write the blog version of this video, and every time a possible trigger appeared, I noticed it at the top of the video and copied and pasted that and placed it in the description. It really is that simple. So where should you place trigger warnings? The whole point of trigger warnings is to warn individuals of what to expect going forward, so you need to make them as accessible as possible. Like with this video where I placed the content information at the beginning, or with a blog where I placed them right at the beginning of the blog entry. With books, you can place them in the blurb, at the start of each chapter, or even the front page, as long as they are easy to find. With films, you can find them in the synopsis and at the beginning of the movie, and it's not just creative content that includes them. Have you ever gone past a pub and seen a sign advertising beer? That in itself is somewhat of a content note. It makes it clear that there are alcoholic beverages being served there. When you go to an arcade, you'll find machines with signs saying things like, "Be gambling aware." They are making it clear that the trigger is present and giving the consumer the option of whether or not to continue forward. When you don't include trigger warnings or content warnings or even content notes, you take away that choice. You are subjecting viewers to subject matter that may cause them distress. If you don't care about the well-being of your consumer, firstly, you're a jerk, but you are also shooting yourself in the foot. Trigger warnings are your friend. Think of it this way. An individual picks up your book and they see the term Arson, which is a trigger I recently used in chapter 12 of my original story, A Donut from Cacacia. The reader doesn't know where, when, or how the arson implemented into the story, and they don't know who is involved. They simply know it's present. This allows those whose trigger is arson to make that choice whether to continue forward or not, but it also intrigues those who aren't triggered by it. It can be seen as a small tease of what's to come, which will make individuals want to read your story. How to use trigger warnings if you're not a content creator. I'm sure many of you watching this are not content creators and may be wondering how this is important to you. The simple answer is that we will all need to be using trigger warnings and use them in everyday communication. If you are using social media, you need to include a line before your post, making it clear what triggers are present. The best way to do this is by abbreviating trigger warning to letters TW, followed by 2 forward slashes and your list of triggers included. Leave a few lines of space before writing your original message. This should also be done for content warnings, which should be abbreviated to CW. For content notes, you don't need to do this. You can if you prefer to, but you do need to include the full term somewhere within your post, so that those who have that term muted will have your post hidden from their view. For example, if your post discusses food, which does not require a trigger warning, as many who experience disordered eating have come forward asking for it not to be flagged as something bad, food is still a trigger for many individuals, and so you do need to include the term food within your post. This was just a short entry discussing how to use trigger warnings correctly and effectively. We all need to be making our communication more accessible and more respectful. Even if you yourself have no triggers or you don't necessarily want to include trigger warnings, you need to look at the wider picture. I hope this entry has helped, and of course, if you have any further questions or additions to this video, please leave them in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was informative to you. Consider subscribing to see more videos like this. Comment your thoughts, like this video, share this video, and yeah. My next subscriber goal is 475 subscribers by the end of this month. I hope that we'll be able to achieve it, and sharing will really help me reach that goal. Thank you again, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!